Okay, let's look at game 7. So I think Karpov might have been feeling a bit crushed by this point in the match, in the 5-minute match. So he stuck with his favourite defence of this match, bishop e7 here, bishop f4 knight f6. So we have another typical Queen's Gambit declined position. After cd, ed, white plays knight f3. Now c6. Kasparov plays h3, so the bishop can potentially be tucked away on h2. He's got reaction then to knight h5, it's bishop h2, so black plays rook e8, after bishop d3, knight f8, so the knight potentially is coming to e6 or g6, it actually goes to g6, bishop gets tucked on h2, but only temporarily. Black now plays bishop d6. So in doing this, black is accepting some possible weakening of his dark squares. White took on d6 and now played queen c2. So white's typical plan, usually in the Queen's Gambit, with this structure, is the minority attack, so a3, b4, b5, to try and isolate some pawns of black and make greater use of c5. So after bishop e3, Kasparov prepares the minority attack by playing a3. After a5, he makes use now of the c5 square by playing knight a4. Knight d7 challenges that potential occupation. Now rook b1, so carrying on the minority attack, preparing it. Knight gf8, now b4. So Karpov takes, has some a-file pressure, and concedes now. In order to stop b5 from white, plays b5 himself, giving him a sort of gaping hole on c5, which is immediately tapped into with knight c5. But Karpov has got c4 to work with, so knight b6, rook a1. It's not completely clear cut, but I think white retains a small advantage now, because white is able to play for e4. He takes first on e6, and now plays knight d2, so he's preparing e4. Knight c4. Before e4 now, though, e4 takes on d2 and then takes on e4. He plays knight b3 first, to queen e7. The knight goes to c5, and now from c5 it can assist for playing e4. So g6 and e4 now. So white's pieces are now increased in scope a little bit. King g7. Queen c3, so the queen's going on the same diagonal as the king. I'm not quite sure why king g7 was played. Knight d7 is a bit of a waiting move maybe. So white took on d5 and took on a8. Now plays rook e1. So white has definitely the trumps in the position. After check, king g8, knight c7. So both these pawns under pressure. Rook b8, and now bishop e2 is played, so the bishop is rerouting to f3 to assist the knight in attacking d5. The knight goes to b6, but leaving b5 and pre, which Kasparov takes. So if knight a4, maybe there's queen c2 attacking that knight. So Karpov is just a pawn down here, it seems. Bishop f1, offering the exchange of rooks. Attacking the knight, but now the exchange of rooks occurs and knight a3. So Kasparov is just a pawn up. So where is the counterplay? Queen c6, now b5, and now knight c2. So the knight's improving itself to maybe go to e3 or b4. It actually goes to e3. Nice pin on c4, attacking d5, actually threatening maybe knight takes d5 after takes, then queen takes c4. So queen d6 was played to answer with queen takes d5 if knight d5. g3, so preparing bishop g2 and then knight takes d5 perhaps. So if knight takes d5, queen takes c4. h5, h4 fixing a bit black's pawns. f5. Now Kasparov actually plays, instead of bishop g2, which might allow f4 with a bit of counterplay, he actually uses this opportunity, now that the diagonal has been slightly weakened with this f5, to just take on c4 and play the discovered check with the pawn, and now queen d4. So white is sitting quite comfortably on the black position, a pawn up. Knight d7, and now 2 pawns up. So here we go into kind of technique, giving up one of the pawns to get better position. The knight can now reroute dangerously, for example, to f3 and g5. So it actually goes to c4 though, now after queen c6, obviously stopping knight f3. And we see now a long bit of technique. We're on move about 51, and the game goes on for about 40 moves from here, so I'm going to have to fast forward now the game. Basically, Kasparov is using his pawn as a decoy to get to the black pawns first, so he goes 2 pawns up. He's 2 pawns up now, and he's winning that h pawn, and now it's just 2 clear pawns up, so Karpov must have been feeling quite crushed in this match. And Kasparov is basically herding the pawns forward now with these knight manoeuvres, getting the right position, just herd them forward, getting the right configuration. So the check, yeah, and then g5 finally. So the pawns are just going forward and forward. Another check. So now they're both on the 6th rank. And after this check, Karpov must have either resigned or lost some time. So it was kind of a positional grind, this game. In overview and summary, kind of minority attack, classical minority attack on the queen side. But interestingly, b5 was played, so both players getting hold of c4 and c5 respectively. But then Kasparov playing for e4, and it's here that the b5 pawn proved to be a weakness later, as it was dropped after this knight c7. There was a bit too much pressure here for Karpov to take in 5 minutes, especially with bishop f3 coming. So he dropped that b5, and it started to be a grind, with the queen, mightily centralised on d4. So Kasparov's endgame technique, just grinding out the win here with these 2 passed pawns on the king side. So just herding them. First they reach the 5th rank, both of them, then the 6th rank, and then it's totally decisive. I hope you enjoyed that. Please leave any comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.